Now for the part we've all been waiting for, lights. We're going to put these blue LEDs inside the engine nacelles. To connect the LEDs to the LED driver, we're going to use some pre-made jumper wires. These female jumper wires already have a housing and a DuPont connector pre-crimped onto the ends of the wires, which makes it convenient for us. Simply trim off the amount of jumper wire that we need, and then use a screwdriver to pry up the little plastic tab that holds on the outside plastic female DuPont housing. This leaves us our pre-crimped DuPont connector. For insulation, we'll use some rubber heat shrink tubing. Because the legs of the LED are too long, we're going to have to trim them down. Keep in mind that there's already a long leg and a short leg, representing both the positive and negative terminals on board the LED. So I'm trimming these off at an angle to preserve which one is the positive and which one is the negative. In this case, it looks like I'm going to go ahead and use the red wire for the positive and the orange wire for the negative terminal. I'll slip on the heat shrink tubing before putting the LED into the DuPont connectors. A little bit of solder into the connectors will hold the LED in place. After I'm satisfied that the solder connection is strong enough to hold the LED in place if I give it a little bit of a tug, then I'll go ahead and use my heat gun to shrink the heat shrink tubing to insulate each of those terminals. Because there's very little space inside of the body of the Lancer, I want to make sure that the wires are only as long as they need to be to connect into the LED driver itself. After I've roughed it into place, I'll go ahead and strip off the ends of the wires, tin the tips of the exposed wires, and fit it into the driver board, making sure the red positive terminal goes into one of the positive slots on one of the channels, and that the orange wire goes into the ground slot on the same channel. After it's soldered into place, I can go ahead and connect the battery power pack and see that the LED does in fact light up. And I'm going to do this for every single one of the LEDs that I connect. Remember, this is only possible because I've programmed the Adafruit trinket to tell the LED driver to turn on all the channels at maximum brightness for the purpose of wiring this thing up and seeing that each of the LEDs does light up. I'm also connecting a third LED for the interior blue light that will shine out the bottom engine vents. The headlights and arc indicators are going to be made using 2mm red and white LEDs. In addition to that, we're also going to use fiber optic cable. This is going to be the plastic stuff that you find on novelty Christmas trees. Each LED is going to drive 4 lengths of fiber optic cable. I'm going to cut off 6 inches of fiber optic cable and then trim them down later on. I'm going to fuse the bundle with a tiny amount of heat shrink tubing. When I apply the heat gun, I have to be really careful to keep it moving and not overheat the cables, otherwise they'll melt. I'll use some larger diameter outer tubing to fit over the base of the LED. Cut the green outer tubing to be only long enough to fit over the yellow inner tubing. Once again, be very careful with the heat gun so that you don't melt the plastic fiber optics. I can see whether or not the fiber optics work by touching the LED legs to the positive and ground terminals on one of the channels on the LED driver. I'll go ahead and make 3 more red fiber optic setups for the rest of the turret arcs, and then 1 white one for the headlights. You'll notice that this video has been sped up immensely. It's worth noting that this 5-minute video is actually about 45 minutes of real-time work. After all of the fiber optic LED setups have been made, we actually have to rough them into place on the LED driver board to make sure that they all fit and they all point to the correct direction, especially for the turret arc indicators. I'm simply inserting the LED legs into the LED driver, bending the legs, and then making sure that they all fit before I do any soldering. You're going to want to solder everything at once simply because the soldering iron is hot enough to ruin some of those plastic fiber optics. After soldering everything onto the LED driver, I can use my flush cutters to cut off any of the excess legs from the LEDs. Once all the legs are trimmed, I can connect power and make sure that all the LEDs light up.